Welcome to StaalX Construction and Steel Podcast. Episode 8, When Data Goes Dark, How the Fed and Steel Markets Are Adapting. Before we start, a quick shout out to StaalX, the smarter way to source steel. Whether you're buying rebar, wire rods, or mesh, you can now get instant pricing, make an offer directly online, and track your orders, all in one place. Check out our new walkthrough video, How to Use StaalX, and see how easy it is to get started at StaalX.com.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're really digging into two parallel stories shaping the U.S. economy. They're coming from completely different places, it feels like.
Right.
On one hand, you've got this fundamental legal fight over presidential trade power. Just how far does it go?
Mm-hmm.
And on the other, something quite different. The sheer ingenuity, really, of the Federal Reserve trying to measure the economy, without its usual stats because of this data drought.
Yeah, it's quite the situation.
So our mission today is to pull out the key insights from reports looking at, Supreme Court arguments on tariffs, the surprisingly strong steel and construction outlook, and these, frankly, cutting-edge, sometimes messy new data sources replacing the missing government figures.
That's right. And for you listening, getting a handle on this now is, I think, pretty critical. We're in this moment of, high uncertainty on both policy and just basic measurement. We're watching a major court case question the president's tariff authority, while at the exact same time, the ways we check the economy's pulse are being kind of radically reinvented on the fly out of necessity.
A real stress test, then, on both policy and data.
Definitely.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting in Washington, where
Yes.
policy gets made and challenged, the Supreme Court's looking at a really pivotal case, questioning the president's power to just impose broad tariffs without, specific approval or laws from Congress.
And what's really interesting, legally speaking, is the hook the administration is using. It's an emergency declaration.
An emergency.
Yeah, under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEPA. Now, this law was historically meant for, genuine sudden national security crises. Think freezing enemy assets in wartime, that kind of thing.
Okay, yeah, that sounds different from setting tariffs across the board. Using an emergency label for trade policy, why is that the core legal issue here?
Well, it really gets to the heart of the separation of powers, doesn't it? Traditionally, Congress holds the power to tax and set tariffs. That's Article 1 of the Constitution. Using IEPA like this arguably lets the president sidestep Congress on one of its core jobs. So the argument against it is basically that this is executive overreach, using an emergency tool for what looks like long-term structural trade policy, which is pretty much what IEPA wasn't designed for. That's why the case is generating so much attention. There seems to be some judicial skepticism there.
Got it. And the specific tariffs we're talking about here, the ones under review, they're called the Reciprocal Tariffs, right? Announced back on April 2nd, 2025. I saw the source material mentioned the administration even called it Liberation Day.
Hey, yeah, quite the branding.
Tells you it was meant as a big statement. And these tariffs, they're pretty hefty, ranging from 10% up to 50% on certain countries.
That's a big political signal, absolutely. But, and this is really vital for understanding the immediate market impact.
Okay.
These reciprocal tariffs are not the same thing as the existing Section 232 tariffs on steel and aluminum.
Ah, okay. That distinction is key then. Because if the Supreme Court does rule against the administration on these reciprocal tariffs, you might expect markets to freak out, right? Thinking all tariffs are gone.
Exactly. But that leads us nicely into the market reality. What happens to steel if these specific IEPA-based tariffs get struck down?
Yeah.
Probably not much, actually. For most steel imports, the impact would likely be minimal.
Really? Why is that?
Simple reason. Most steel imports are already covered by those ongoing Section 232 duties, which have a clearer basis in law, different statute, and they aren't part of the specific court challenge. Crucially, the reciprocal tariffs only ever applied to a pretty small niche group of products.
Big ones.
The ones that had managed to get a Section 232 exclusion previously, and importantly, that whole exclusion application process, it's already been shut down, terminated.
Okay, so the pool of affected goods was small and shrinking anyway.
Pretty much.
So even if the court pushes back on the president's power in this specific IEPA case, those other tools, like Section 232 for steel and aluminum, Section 301 targeting China, they're still in place.
Still standing, yeah.
And maybe, paradoxically, a ruling against the administration here could just push President Trump to lean even more heavily on those existing tools since they have, a clearer legal path.
That's a very real possibility. It limits how the administration might apply tariffs in the future, but maybe not the if. Limits the tool, not necessarily the policy goal.
Interesting.
And the steel market seems to be reflecting that kind of underlying stability. We saw domestic rebar producers just announced $30 per short ton price hike.
Yeah, I saw that.
And wire rod pricing is holding firm too. The domestic mills seem to have decent demand and, crucially, less competition from imports, thanks almost entirely to those Section 232 protections that aren't going anywhere right now.
Okay, so steel seems relatively stable, despite the Washington drama. But this is where it gets, I thought, really fascinating. Looking beyond just steel, the wider construction sector, contractors, developers, they're sounding increasingly upbeat. And they point to one big reason, this massive boost from AI-driven investment spreading across the whole economy.
Oh, absolutely. That AI investment is genuinely warping the construction landscape right now. Just look at data center spending.
Okay.
It has just exploded. It's hit $32.9 billion year to date. That's an incredible 92.8% increase compared to the same time in 2024.
92.8%.
Wow.
That's staggering. And the sources said this isn't happening everywhere equally, is it? It's concentrated.
Very concentrated. The sources note this boom is really focused geographically. Southern states, specifically Louisiana, Virginia, Texas, they account for over 2/3 of all that U.S. starts spending.
Wow.
So you have these enormous infrastructure projects creating these localized hotspots of huge demand for materials, for labor.
Right. And looking at overall confidence, there's the Dodge Momentum Index, the DMI. It dipped a bit in October, down 7.1% after some really strong months.
Yeah, came off record highs.
But the overall picture for future non-residential projects still looks incredibly solid, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Especially when you look year over year.
It does. Year over year, the DMI is up 52% compared to October 2024. Huge jump. But we do need to add a little context there.
Okay.
Some of that increase is likely driven by rising project costs, people anticipating higher labor costs, higher material costs. That inflates the dollar value in the index. So it's not just pure volume growth. Inflation's definitely baked in.
And you can see that inflation pressure clearly elsewhere. The ISM report for October was telling, I thought. Construction was actually one of only 6 sectors reporting a contraction in activity. Things slowed down.
Right.
But at the same time, it was among 16 sectors reporting paying higher prices for inputs.
Same old story, isn't it? Slower activity, higher costs.
Yeah. Specifically, copper products, electrical components, 3rd month in a row for price increases on those.
And that connects directly to supply chain issues, right? The report specifically called out construction labor and, interestingly, transformers as being in short supply.
Transformers.
Yeah.
Like for the electrical grid. Makes sense with data centers.
Exactly. And if you look inside construction, say at multifamily housing, it's a mixed bag too. Confidence is actually up year over year for low-rise apartments, both market rate and subsidized.
Right.
But the weakness, it's concentrated in mid to high-rise buildings and condos, often in those denser urban cores. So it's a really segmented market response.
Fascinating. Okay, so we have this legal check playing out, a market that's adapting, maybe even thriving in some areas like AI infrastructure.
Yeah.
Now let's pivot to that other big challenge.
Yeah.
How are policymakers even supposed to track all this? Measure this fast-moving, complex economy when the government itself is, shut down.
Yeah, this record-long government shutdown started October 1st. It means the essential data just isn't there. No monthly unemployment rate from the BLS, no consumer price index, the CPI, the absolute basics. And that forces the Federal Reserve especially into this data vacuum. It raises really urgent questions about how they can make good, timely decisions.
So how are they coping? It seems like it's this weird data paradox, not a lack of data, but maybe too much. A flood of information, and they're trying to find the signal in the noise.
That's a good way to put it. They're drowning in information from, scraping websites, AI models, even tracking cell phones, apparently. The challenge is pulling a clear, reliable signal out of all that chaos.
So what are they actually using?
It's a mix. Some tried and true methods, some completely new stuff. For instance, the Atlanta Fed staff, they went back and looked at their historical quarterly surveys. They survey about 5,600 executives.
Okay.
And they found that historically, those surveys tracked the official government numbers on output growth really closely. So that gave them confidence ahead of the October Fed meeting to say, look, our internal read is that the 3rd quarter really did tick up strongly. They could push back against fears that things were suddenly falling off a cliff, even without the official GDP numbers yet.
That's clever, using their own history. But they must be using newer private sector tools in real time, too.
Oh, definitely. Online job postings, for example,
Mm.
from places like Indeed. They've actually shown those track the official government job opening reports pretty consistently in the past. So that gives them a high-frequency peak at labor demand.
Right. And payroll data.
Yeah, ADP, the big payroll processor, they reported, 42,000 private sector jobs added in October, and interestingly, 5,000 of those were in construction.
Tying back to that AI boom again.
Exactly. And ADP even did a study showing their estimates might actually capture the construction sector's share of jobs better than the official BLS monthly survey does, because of how they sample. Potentially a better indicator for that specific booming sector.
But then you have other players, right? Like this firm, Revelio Labs, only 7 years old, scrapes LinkedIn and other places. They estimated overall jobs actually fell by 9,000 last month.
That's right, mostly blaming government and retail losses.
So even the private data is giving conflicting signals. ADP says up, Revelio says down, makes it tough.
That's the fundamental problem, this fragmentation. And you see the exact same issue trying to track inflation without the CPI.
How so?
Well, there's Price Stats, founded by Alberto Cavallo at Harvard. It scrapes millions of online prices from retailers, real-time, massive database. Very impressive. But Cavallo himself says, quote, "We can't replace the CPI." Big limitations. They have basically nothing on housing costs, which is a huge part of inflation, and very limited data on services prices.
And services inflation, that's the really sticky part, isn't it? The hard part to measure even normally, let alone just by scraping websites.
Exactly. It's tough to track the price of a haircut or a doctor's visit with a web crawler. That's the real black box.
So what are they doing about that?
Well, they're trying. There are efforts using AI now to read through thousands of pages of company earnings reports, literally scanning the text for clues about price increases or pressures.
Wow, AI reading earnings calls.
Yeah. And the Boston Fed is doing work on sentiment analysis. They're using AI to analyze the actual language used in the Fed's own Beige Book reports.
The qualitative summaries from regional banks.
Exactly. Trying to see if the words bankers use can flag recession risks, maybe even before the hard numbers show it.
It's incredible. Using machine learning on the language itself. But does all this tech, all this data scraping miss something? You know, the human element, understanding why things are happening.
That is still so crucial. And Fed Governor Lisa Cook talked about this recently. She called it the need for the mortar between the bricks.
The mortar between the bricks.
Yeah. Those direct conversations. Talking to business leaders, workers, community members. Filling in the gaps, understanding the context. That's especially vital right now, she argued, when policy itself, like tariff, like changing immigration rules, is shifting the ground so quickly. Faster than any lagging government report or even these fast private data streams can fully capture.
So the human intelligence piece is still irreplaceable.
Absolutely, especially in turbulent times. So, stepping back for a moment, we've really looked at two key things today. First, that foundational legal check on executive trade power happening at the Supreme Court,
Right.
and how it might just force the administration towards different tools. And second, at the same time, these critical, almost emergency innovations in how we even measure the economy when the official stats disappear. The Fed adapting with these real-time, sometimes fragmented data sources.
And hopefully you, listening, now have a better feel for both sides of this. The legal guardrails potentially going up around trade policy that shift maybe from IEPA back towards things like Section 232, and these advanced, sometimes contradictory new tools policymakers are scrambling to use to see what's actually happening out there.
But let's leave you with maybe one final thought to chew on. We know the Supreme Court's decision on those reciprocal tariffs might push the administration to rely more on existing, but more narrowly targeted tools.
Yeah.
Like Section 232, Section 301.
Right, sectoral ones.
Exactly. Tools designed to cause very specific disruptions. Raising prices just for aluminum, maybe, or specific copper parts, which we already heard are in short supply.
Okay.
So here's the question. The Fed is rapidly adopting these new data sources, online prices, aggregated job postings, which are often broad economy-wide indicators, right?
Yeah, generally.
How well will these fast, but maybe more generalized new measurement tools be able to actually track, model, and respond to the highly targeted, very specific sectoral shocks caused by those existing tariff tools?
So will our policy tools, getting maybe more precise and targeted, outrun our measurement tools, which are getting faster but maybe broader? which adapts faster.
That's the tension, I think. Will the measurement catch up to the targeted nature of the policy? Something to watch.
Definitely something to mull over as you see those price changes in job reports, real or estimated, come in. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening. Explore more at www.staalx.com.